I never thought a family dinner could destroy everything I believed about love and loyalty. At 70 years old, I thought I had seen it all, experienced every possible heartbreak. I was wrong. The dining room glowed with warm candlelight, the mahogany table set with my grandmother's china, the same china I'd promised would someday belong to Patricia, my daughter-in-law. The aroma of pot roast filled the air, James's favorite meal since he was 7 years old. I had spent the entire afternoon cooking, just like I always did when the family came over. James had called 2 weeks earlier with excitement in his voice. "Mom, I got the promotion. Senior partner at the firm. We should celebrate properly." I could hear the pride in his voice, and my heart swelled. My son, the successful lawyer I had worked 2 jobs to put through law school. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. The boy I had raised alone after his father died when he was 12. Patricia's laughter echoed from the living room where she was showing our neighbors, the Hendersons, photos on her phone. Probably pictures from their recent trip to Europe, their 3rd vacation this year. I smiled, proud that my sacrifices had given them the life they deserved. When they had financial troubles 5 years ago, I had sold my dream cottage by the lake to help them keep their house. It seemed worth it then. "Dinner's ready," I called out, untying my apron. The family gathered around the table, James pulling out Patricia's chair with the same gentleness he'd shown since their wedding 8 years ago. They made such a beautiful couple, him with his father's strong jaw and kind eyes, her with her blonde hair perfectly styled as always. "This looks amazing, Mom," James said, squeezing my shoulder as he passed. "You outdid yourself." Patricia smiled, that practiced smile of hers. Eleanor always goes above and beyond. Such a wonderful mother-in-law. But something in her tone felt different tonight, though I couldn't place what. We talked about James's promotion, about their plans to renovate the kitchen, about everything except what I would soon discover was really on their minds. I served generous portions, making sure everyone had enough, saving the smallest piece for myself as I always did. "I'll just grab the wine from the kitchen," Patricia said, standing gracefully. "The bottle James brought needs to breathe a little longer." I continued chatting with James about his new responsibilities at the firm, feeling so proud of the man he had become. The Hendersons complimented the meal, and I basked in the warmth of having my home filled with family and friends. That's when I heard it. Patricia's voice drifted from the kitchen, hushed but clear. She was on the phone, probably with her sister Janet. They talked every evening at this time. "She's looking more frail lately," Patricia was saying. "The doctor said her heart condition is getting worse. I don't think she'll last much longer, maybe 2 years at most." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Patricia was talking about me. "Once she's gone, we'll finally have the inheritance," she continued, her voice taking on an excited edge I'd never heard before. "James estimates it's worth at least $800,000 with the house and her investments. We can finally get that place in Cabo we've been looking at." My heart stopped. The conversation at the table continued around me, but I couldn't hear anything except the blood rushing in my ears. "James was laughing at something Mr. Henderson said, completely unaware that his wife was in the next room planning their life after my death. The best part," Patricia continued, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "is that she's already updated her will to leave everything to James. She did it last year when she had that little scare with her blood pressure. She doesn't even realize how much she's actually worth." I set my fork down carefully, my hands trembling. This woman I had treated like a daughter, who called me Mom, who I had helped through graduate school, who wore my mother's pearl earrings on her wedding day. She was counting down the days until my death. "I know it sounds terrible," Patricia said, her voice dropping to an even more confidential whisper. "But honestly, Janet, she's just taking up space now. She doesn't travel anymore, barely leaves the house except for doctor appointments. What kind of life is that? At least when she's gone, her money will go to someone who can actually enjoy it." I gripped the edge of the table, feeling like the room was spinning. James noticed my distress and leaned over. "Mom, are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile, the same smile I'd perfected over 70 years of swallowing my feelings for the sake of others. "Just a little tired, sweetheart. I'm fine." Patricia returned with the wine, her face glowing with whatever excitement her phone conversation had given her. She poured glasses for everyone, raising hers in a toast. "To James and his bright future," she said, looking directly at me with those cold blue eyes that I was just now seeing clearly for the first time. "To family," James added, clinking his glass against mine. I lifted my glass with a steady hand, even though everything inside me was crumbling. To family, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I smiled when expected, laughed at the right moments, cleared the dishes as Patricia complimented the dessert she knew I had made from scratch. But inside, I was seeing everything differently. Every affectionate gesture from Patricia felt calculated. Every smile seemed false. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the dirty dishes. 70 years old, and I was just now learning what it felt like to be seen as nothing more than an obstacle between someone and money. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, something else began to take root alongside the hurt. A quiet, determined anger that would soon change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, Patricia's words echoing in my mind like a broken record. She's just taking up space now. The phrase cut deeper each time I replayed it, carving out pieces of my heart I didn't know I still had left to lose. By morning, I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made me who I thought I was. I made my coffee with shaking hands, the routine feeling foreign and meaningless. The kitchen still smelled faintly of last night's pot roast, and I found myself staring at the empty wine glasses I'd left on the counter, too devastated to clean up properly. That's when I started noticing things I'd been blind to before. The stack of mail on my counter included a real estate flyer that had been opened and folded back carefully. I never looked at real estate flyers anymore. Why would I? But someone had been through it, and I realized Patricia must have been examining it during one of her recent visits. My heart sank as I saw several properties circled in red ink. Expensive properties. Properties that would require exactly the kind of money my estate would provide. I walked through my house with new eyes, seeing everything differently. This wasn't just my home anymore. In Patricia and James's minds, it was their future investment. The antique furniture my mother had passed down to me, the collection of first edition books I'd spent 40 years building, the jewelry box filled with pieces from 3 generations of women in my family, none of it was mine anymore. I was just the aging caretaker until they could claim what they apparently already considered theirs. The phone rang around 10, and I saw James's name on the caller ID. For a moment, I considered not answering. What was the point? But old habits die hard, and I picked up on the 4th ring. "Hi, Mom, just checking on you," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "You seemed a little off last night. Patricia was worried you might be coming down with something." Patricia was worried. The irony was so sharp it took my breath away. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I managed. "Just tired." "Well, that's good. Listen, Patricia had an idea. She thinks you might enjoy having someone come in to help with the house. You know, light cleaning, maybe some cooking. Take some of the burden off you." I gripped the phone tighter. A helper. Someone to make sure I was comfortable in my final years, or someone to make sure their investment was being properly maintained. "That's thoughtful of her," I said carefully. "But I managed just fine." "I know you do, Mom. You're amazing. It's just, we worry about you being alone in that big house. What if you fall? What if something happens?" His concern sounded genuine, but now I wondered if it was concern for me or concern about their inheritance being jeopardized if I ended up in expensive medical care. After I hung up, I found myself remembering things differently. Last Christmas, when Patricia had insisted on having the family photo taken in my living room instead of theirs. "Your house has such better lighting," she'd said. But now I wondered if she wanted pictures of herself in the house that would someday be hers. The time she'd spent an entire afternoon measuring my kitchen cabinets, claiming she was just curious about the layout for her own renovation. The way she'd asked detailed questions about my investment accounts, claiming James needed the information just in case of emergency. I made a list in my head of all the times I'd attributed innocent motives to behaviors that now seemed calculated. The frequency of their visits had increased over the past year, right around the time my doctor had mentioned my heart condition might be progressing faster than expected. Patricia had been in the room for that conversation, I remembered now. She'd asked more questions than I had. By afternoon, I couldn't stand the weight of my thoughts anymore. I needed air, needed to move, needed to do something other than sit in this house cataloging the ways I'd been blind to my own exploitation. That's when Rosa knocked on my door. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said in her accented English, her face creased with concern. "I saw you didn't put the garbage out this morning. Are you feeling okay?" Rosa Martinez had been coming to help with my housekeeping twice a week for the past 3 years. She was James's idea initially. He'd found her through a service and insisted on paying for it himself. "You've done enough for this family, Mom," he'd said then. "Let us do something for you." I looked at Rosa's weathered hands, at the worry lines around her kind brown eyes, and something cracked open inside me. Here was someone who noticed when I didn't put out the garbage, someone who cared enough to check on me when something seemed off. "Come in, Rosa," I said, stepping aside. "I could use some company." She followed me into the kitchen, immediately noticing the unwashed dishes from last night. Without being asked, she began filling the sink with warm, soapy water. "You had company last night?" she asked, not looking at me. "James and Patricia came for dinner." I sat heavily at my kitchen table, watching Rosa work. "To celebrate James's promotion." Rosa nodded, scrubbing a wine glass with careful attention. "That's good news. You must be very proud." I was quiet for so long that Rosa turned to look at me. When she saw my face, she dried her hands on the dish towel and sat down across from me at the table. "What's wrong, Mrs. Eleanor? You look like someone who has seen a ghost." The kindness in her voice, the genuine concern, broke something loose in me that I'd been holding back since last night. Before I could stop myself, tears were streaming down my face. "Rosa," I whispered, "have you ever discovered that people you love see you as just an obstacle?" She reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. Her skin was rough from work, warm from the dishwater, real in a way that everything else in my life suddenly felt false. "Tell me," she said simply, and I did. I told her about the phone conversation, about the real estate flyers, about the sudden clarity that my own family was waiting for me to die. Rosa listened without judgment, occasionally squeezing my hand, letting me pour out the pain that felt too big for my body to contain. When I finished, Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Eleanor, I have worked for many families. Some love, some don't. But love is not about waiting for someone to leave. Love is about wanting them to stay." Her simple words hit me like a physical blow. That's what had been missing. No one in my family acted like they wanted me to stay. They wanted me comfortable, they wanted me safe, they wanted me cared for. But did they want me here? When was the last time James had called just to hear my voice? When was the last time Patricia had asked about my day because she actually cared about the answer? "What will you do?" Rosa asked gently. I looked at this woman who had noticed one missed garbage day, who had seen through my brave face in seconds, who sat holding my hand while I fell apart in my own kitchen. Then I thought about Patricia's voice on the phone last night, calculating the value of my life in dollars and vacation homes. "I don't know yet," I said, "but something has to change." Rosa squeezed my hand one more time. "Sometimes," she said, "the family we choose is more important than the family we are born with." As she said those words, something shifted inside me. For the first time since last night's dinner, I felt a spark of something other than despair. It wasn't hope exactly, not yet, but it was the beginning of a plan. The following weeks passed in a strange sort of suspended animation. I went through my daily routines, morning coffee, reading the newspaper, tending to my small garden, but everything felt different now. I was like an actress playing the role of myself, watching my own life from the outside. Rosa came on her regular schedule, Tuesdays and Fridays, and I found myself looking forward to her visits in a way I hadn't expected. She had a quiet way of moving through my house that felt peaceful rather than intrusive. Unlike Patricia, who always seemed to be cataloging and evaluating, Rosa simply cleaned and cared. On her second visit after our kitchen conversation, she brought something with her. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said, pulling a small wrapped package from her bag. "My daughter Maria made these for you." Inside the tissue paper were 3 small corn husk dolls, delicately crafted with bright scraps of fabric for dresses. They were simple but beautiful, clearly made with care and attention. "Maria is 8, Rosa explained, watching my face as I examined the dolls. "When I told her about you, she wanted to make you something. She said every grandmother should have toys to play with her grandchildren." The innocent sweetness of it broke something open in me. Here was a child I'd never met, making gifts for a stranger because her mother had spoken kindly about me. When was the last time my own grandchildren, James and Patricia's kids, had made me anything? When was the last time they'd visited without being dragged along by their parents? "They're beautiful," I said, and meant it. "Please tell Maria thank you." Rosa smiled, but then her expression grew more serious. "Mrs. Eleanor, can I ask you something?" I nodded, setting the dolls carefully on my coffee table. "Your son and his wife, when they visit, do they spend time with you? Really spend time?" The question caught me off guard, partly because it was so direct, and partly because I realized I didn't have a good answer. "Well, they come for dinner fairly regularly. We talk about their work, their plans. But do they ask about your day? Your feelings? Do they want to know about your life before they were born?" I was quiet for a long moment, thinking. When James and Patricia visited, the conversation was always about them, their work, their house, their travels, their children's activities. I was expected to listen, to ask the right questions, to be interested and supportive. But when was the last time either of them had asked about my book club, or my volunteer work at the hospital, or my memories of their father? No, I said quietly. I suppose they don't. Rosa nodded sadly, as if she'd expected this answer. My mother lives in Mexico. When I call her, she tells me about her neighbor's new baby, about the flowers in her garden, about the telenovela she watches. I want to know these things because they are part of who she is. That is love. That afternoon, after Rosa left, I called my friend Margaret, whom I'd known since we were young mothers raising our children together. Margaret had always been more observant about people's motivations than I was. Margaret, I said when she answered, can I ask you something? Be honest with me. Of course. Eleanor, what's on your mind? When you see James and Patricia with me, what do you think? Do they seem loving? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Eleanor, why are you asking this? I need an outside perspective, please, Margaret sighed. Well, if you really want honesty, I've always thought Patricia seemed a bit calculating. The way she asks questions about your finances, the way she looks at your things. And James, bless him, he's a good boy. But he does whatever she tells him to do. My heart sank, even though this confirmed what I was beginning to understand. You've noticed this for a while? Eleanor, honey, I didn't want to say anything because I know how much you love them. But yes, I've wondered about their motives for a few years now. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I went through my house systematically, looking at it the way Patricia might. I opened drawers and cabinets, examined my jewelry, looked at my art collection with an appraiser's eye. By the time I finished, I felt sick to my stomach. I was worth much more than I'd realized. The house alone, in this neighborhood, had to be worth close to $500,000. My late husband's life insurance and my careful investing over the years had built a portfolio I rarely thought about, but that was probably worth another $400,000. Add in the antiques, the jewelry, the collectibles, and Patricia's estimate of $800,000 was probably conservative. I was a very wealthy woman who lived like I was scraping by, and I'd never fully understood the implications of that until now. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month ago. I called my attorney, Harold Brennan, whom I'd known professionally for 30 years. Harold, I'd like to schedule an appointment to review my will and estate planning. Of course, Eleanor. Is everything all right? You sound a bit strained. I'm fine, Harold. I just think it's time to make sure everything is in order. We set an appointment for the following week. In the meantime, I began paying attention to things I'd been oblivious to before. James called every few days, but the conversations followed the same pattern. He'd ask if I was feeling well, mention something Patricia thought I might need, and update me on their lives. But he never asked what I was reading, never asked about my friends, never seemed curious about my thoughts or feelings. Patricia stopped by unexpectedly on Thursday afternoon, bringing flowers and a concerned expression. Eleanor, James told me you seemed tired during your last phone call. I wanted to check on you. I watched her move through my living room, her eyes lingering on the antique sideboard, the crystal chandelier, the oil painting my husband had bought me for our 25th anniversary. She wasn't looking at these things with affection or interest. She was appraising them. I'm fine, dear, I said, just busy with some personal business. Oh, nothing worrying, I hope? Her interest sharpened immediately. Just updating some paperwork. You know how it is. I saw something flicker across her face, anxiety, concern, curiosity, before she smiled and changed the subject. But for the rest of her visit, she seemed distracted, asking casual questions about my health, my energy level, whether I'd been to the doctor recently. When she left, she hugged me at the door as she always did. But this time, instead of feeling like affection, it felt like someone checking to see if a fruit was ripe enough to pick. That Friday, when Rosa came for her regular cleaning day, I was waiting for her with coffee and homemade cookies. Mrs. Eleanor, she said, looking pleased but surprised, you didn't need to do this. I wanted to, I said. Rosa, can you tell me about your family? About your children? Her face lit up in a way I rarely saw in my own house anymore. She told me about Maria, the 8-year-old artist who made the dolls, about her teenage son, Carlos, who was struggling with math but excelled at soccer, about her husband, Miguel, who worked construction and sent money to his elderly mother in Guadalajara. Carlos wants to be an engineer, she said with pride. He draws bridges and buildings all the time, but college is so expensive here. What about financial aid? Scholarships? Rosa shrugged. We don't know how these things work. We are not educated people, Mrs. Eleanor. We work hard, but we don't understand the system. I found myself leaning forward, genuinely interested in a way I hadn't been about anything in months. I could help you figure that out if you'd like. I have some experience with college applications. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. You would do that? For us? Of course I would. As I said those words, I realized something profound. This was the first time in years that I'd offered help because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated to. Rosa's family struggles touched something in me that had been dormant for too long, the desire to make a real difference in someone's life. That night, I sat in my study with my husband's old accounting ledgers spread before me, really examining my financial situation for the first time in years. I had more money than I could spend in my remaining years, more than enough to live comfortably and still help people who truly needed it. People like Rosa, who noticed when I forgot to put out the garbage. People like her daughter Maria, who made dolls for grandmothers she'd never met. People like her son Carlos, who dreamed of building bridges but didn't know how to afford the education to make it happen. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia and James saw my money as their future vacation fund, their ticket to a more luxurious lifestyle. But Rosa's family saw my potential help as a chance to build something meaningful, to invest in education and dreams. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I realized my plan was beginning to take shape. It wasn't about revenge exactly. It was about making sure my legacy went to people who would honor it rather than squander it on material things. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. My appointment with Harold Brennan was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I arrived early, sitting in his elegant waiting room with its leather chairs and oil paintings of distinguished-looking judges. I'd been in this office many times over the years for routine legal matters, but today felt different. Today, I was taking control of my own narrative. Harold greeted me with the warmth of an old friend. "Eleanor, you look well. How can I help you today?" "I want to completely revise my will," I said without preamble. "Everything." Harold raised his eyebrows slightly but maintained his professional composure. "All right, may I ask what's prompted this decision?" I had rehearsed this conversation. "I've been doing some thinking about legacy, about what really matters. I want to make sure my assets go to people who will truly benefit from them." "Of course. Are we talking about changes in how much goes to James? Or are you considering other beneficiaries as well?" "Other beneficiaries," I said firmly. "I want to leave everything to Rosa Martinez and her family." Harold set down his pen and looked at me carefully. "Eleanor, Rosa is your housekeeper, correct? This is a significant decision. Have you thought this through completely?" I met his gaze steadily. "Harold, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He nodded slowly. "Very well, but I have to ask, is James aware of this change? And what about your current will?" "I believe everything was left to him, with provisions for Patricia should something happen to him first. James is not aware, and I'd like to keep it that way for now. As for my reasoning," I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Let's just say I've recently learned some things about people's true motivations that have clarified my thinking." Harold was too experienced an attorney to press for details he didn't need. "I'll draft the new documents. You'll need witnesses who aren't beneficiaries." "I can arrange that here." "Thank you, Harold." "And Harold? I'd like this to remain completely confidential until after my death." "Of course. Attorney-client privilege applies whether you're alive or dead." As I walked out of Harold's office an hour later, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The new will would be ready for signing by Friday. In the meantime, I had other preparations to make. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove to the community college where Rosa's son Carlos was taking remedial math classes. I found him in the library, hunched over a textbook with a frustrated expression. "Carlos?" I approached his table carefully. "I'm Mrs. Eleanor, your mother's employer." He looked up, startled. "Oh, Mrs. Eleanor, my mother talks about you all the time. Is everything okay? Is she in trouble?" His immediate concern for his mother touched me. "No, sweetheart, she's not in trouble. I was wondering if I could talk to you about your studies." Carlos's face brightened with surprise and pride as he showed me his engineering textbooks, his sketches of bridge designs, his careful notes in a mixture of English and Spanish. This young man had dreams and talent, but he was struggling with the language barrier and the financial reality of his situation. "Carlos, what would you say if I told you I wanted to help you apply for scholarships? And that I'd like to pay for your textbooks and fees while you're getting your prerequisites finished?" His eyes widened. "Mrs. Eleanor, why would you do that?" "Because your mother is important to me, and your success would make her happy. And because I believe in investing in young people who work hard." Carlos's eyes filled with tears. "I would say thank you 1,000 times, but I have to ask my parents first." "Of course you do. Talk to them tonight, and we'll discuss it more when your mother comes to work on Friday." That evening, I called my friend Margaret again. Margaret, I need a favor, a strange one. What kind of favor? I want you to call James and mention that you're worried about me. Tell him I seem to be making some odd decisions lately. Eleanor, what are you up to? I'm testing something. Will you do it? Margaret was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. The next afternoon, James called. His voice was tight with barely controlled anxiety. Mom, Margaret called me. She said you seemed confused when she talked to you yesterday. She mentioned something about you giving money away. I almost smiled. Margaret had played her part perfectly. Oh, did she? I don't know what she means by confused. I'm thinking very clearly these days. But Mom, are you making any financial decisions? Any changes to your accounts or anything like that? There it was. Not, are you feeling all right? Or, do you need help? The first thing on his mind was money. I'm handling my affairs, James. Is there a reason I shouldn't be? No, of course not. Well, Patricia and I worry that someone might try to take advantage of you. There are a lot of scam artists out there who target elderly people. Elderly people. As if I were a helpless victim rather than a woman who had managed her own finances successfully for decades. I appreciate your concern, sweetheart, but I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. I know you are, Mom, but maybe it would be good if I looked over any major financial decisions with you. You know, just as a second set of eyes. That won't be necessary. There was a pause. Mom, you're scaring me a little. You sound different. Different how? I don't know. Distant. Are you angry with us about something? The question hung in the air. This was my chance to confront him, to tell him what I'd overheard, to demand explanations. But I realized I didn't want explanations. I already knew everything I needed to know. I'm not angry, James. I'm just focused on making sure my final years are spent the way I want to spend them. Final years? Mom, don't talk like that. You're going to be around for a long time. The irony of his words, given what Patricia had said about me not lasting much longer, was almost overwhelming. I hope so, sweetheart, but at my age, it's important to have things in order. That Friday, Rosa arrived for work with a glow of excitement I'd never seen before. Mrs. Eleanor, she said, bustling into the kitchen, Carlos told us what you offered. Miguel and I, we talked all night. We cannot believe your kindness. It's not kindness, Rosa. It's investment. I believe Carlos will do great things. But why us? You have your own family. I was quiet for a moment, then decided to be honest. Rosa, do you know what family really means? She paused in her cleaning. Family is people who love you no matter what. People who want good things for you. Exactly. And sometimes the people who love us that way aren't the people we were born to. Rosa looked at me with understanding in her eyes. Your son and his wife, they don't see you the way we do. No, they don't. That afternoon, I signed my new will in Harold's office, with his secretary and paralegal as witnesses. Everything I owned would go to Rosa Martinez and her children, with provisions for their education and a trust to ensure they were taken care of for the rest of their lives. But I wasn't finished yet. That evening, I called James and Patricia. I'd like to have you both over for dinner on Sunday. There's something important I want to discuss with you. Of course, Mom, James said. Is everything all right? Everything is fine. I just think it's time we had an honest conversation about the future. After I hung up, I sat in my garden as the sun set, feeling a strange sense of peace. Sunday would be the day I took back my power, the day I stopped being the helpless elderly woman they thought they were managing. Rosa had been right. The family we choose is more important than the family we're born with. And I had chosen mine. Now it was time to let James and Patricia know that their inheritance plans were about to change dramatically. The game was set. All that remained was to play my final hand. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of October afternoon that makes you want to stay inside with tea and a good book. But I had more pressing matters on my mind than the weather. I spent the morning preparing what would likely be the last family dinner I would ever host for James and Patricia. I chose the menu carefully. All of James's childhood favorites: beef tenderloin with herb butter, the garlic mashed potatoes he used to request for every birthday, green bean casserole made from my mother's recipe. If this was going to be goodbye, I wanted him to remember the mother who had loved him unconditionally for 35 years. Rosa had offered to come help with the cooking, but I declined. This was something I needed to do myself. As I worked in the kitchen, muscle memory took over. The same movements I'd made thousands of times before, preparing meals for a family that I'd believed loved me as much as I loved them. By 5:30, everything was ready. The dining room table was set with my grandmother's china, just like it had been 3 weeks ago when my world fell apart. But this time, I was in control of the conversation. James and Patricia arrived precisely at 6, as they always did. Patricia carried a bottle of expensive wine and her usual practiced smile. Something smells amazing in here, James said, kissing my cheek. You've really outdone yourself, Mom. It's all your favorites, I said, studying his face. I wanted tonight to be special. Patricia handed me the wine. This is a Cabernet from that vineyard we visited in Sonoma last month. I thought you might enjoy it. I accepted the bottle, noting the price tag that had been left on. $85, a bottle of wine that cost more than Rosa made in a day of hard work. We sat down to dinner, and for the first 20 minutes, everything proceeded normally. James talked about a difficult case at work. Patricia described their plans for renovating their master bathroom. I listened and responded appropriately, playing my role one last time. Then, as Patricia complimented the tenderloin, I decided it was time. I'm glad you're enjoying the meal, I said, setting down my fork. I wanted this dinner to be memorable because I have something important to tell you both. James looked up from his plate. That sounds serious, Mom. Is everything okay? Are you feeling all right? Always the health question first. Always the concern about whether their investment was deteriorating. I'm feeling fine, James. Better than I have in weeks, actually. What I want to tell you is that I've been doing some thinking about the future, about my legacy. Patricia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Your legacy? Yes. About what I want to leave behind when I'm gone, and who I want to benefit from the life I've built. I saw James and Patricia exchange a quick glance. Patricia's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Mom, James said carefully, you're not planning anything drastic, are you? Because Patricia and we've been a little worried about some of the things you've been saying lately. Worried about what, exactly? Well, Margaret mentioned that you seem to be making some unusual financial decisions, and you've been talking about making changes to your will. So they had been talking about my will. Of course they had. I have made changes to my will, I said calmly. Significant ones. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Patricia set down her wine glass with excessive care. What kind of changes? She asked, her voice artificially light. I looked at each of them, these two people I had loved and supported and sacrificed for, who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between them and a comfortable retirement. I've decided to leave everything to Rosa Martinez and her family. The silence that followed was deafening. James's face went white. Patricia's mouth actually fell open. Rosa? James said finally. Your housekeeper, Rosa? Yes. Mom, he struggled for words. That's insane. She's a stranger. She's been working for you for what, 3 years? She's not a stranger to me, James. She knows more about my daily life, my feelings, my needs than either of you do. Patricia found her voice. Eleanor, I think you're having some kind of episode. This isn't rational thinking. Rosa is taking advantage of you. I felt a cold fury rise in my chest. Taking advantage of me? Rosa, who notices when I forget to put out the garbage? Rosa, whose 8-year-old daughter makes me toys because she thinks every grandmother should have something to play with her grandchildren. Rosa, who sits with me in my kitchen and listens when I'm sad? Mom, please, James said, leaning forward. I know you're fond of Rosa, but you can't just give away our inheritance to the help. Our inheritance. Not my estate, not my life's work. Their inheritance. Your inheritance? I repeated softly. Tell me, James, what have you done to earn an inheritance? He looked stunned. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And I raised you to be a good man. I worked 2 jobs to put you through law school. I sold my dream house to help you when you were in financial trouble. But what have you done for me lately? Besides wait for me to die? That's not fair, Patricia said, her voice rising. We visit you, we check on you, we worry about you. Do you? Or do you check on your investment? I reached into the sideboard behind me and pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Inside were printouts of real estate listings, the same ones I'd found in my mail that Patricia had been examining. Explain these, I said, sliding the papers across the table. Patricia's face flushed red. I don't know what you're talking about. These are real estate listings that someone looked through in my house. Someone circled properties worth exactly what my estate is worth. Someone has been planning how to spend my money before I'm even dead. James looked at the papers, then at Patricia. Patricia, what is this? But I wasn't finished. And James, would you like to explain to me why the first thing you asked when Margaret said I seemed confused was whether I was making financial decisions, not whether I needed help, not whether I was feeling lonely or scared? Money. That was your first concern. The fight seemed to go out of James. He slumped in his chair, unable to meet my eyes. But the worst part, I continued, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest, was overhearing Patricia on the phone 3 weeks ago, talking about how I won't last much longer and how excited she is to inherit my money so you can buy a place in Cabo. Patricia's face went from red to white. You heard that? I heard you say I was just taking up space. I heard you calculating how much my life is worth in vacation homes and luxury purchases. I heard you counting down the days until I die. Eleanor, you don't understand, Patricia said desperately. I was just talking. I didn't mean... You meant every word. I stood up, my hands surprisingly steady. And now you need to understand something. That conversation changed everything. It opened my eyes to what you really think of me. James finally looked up. Mom, please, we can fix this. We can do better. Can you? When was the last time either of you asked about my book club? When was the last time you asked about my friends? My interests, my feelings? When was the last time you called just to hear my voice, not to check on your inheritance? Neither of them answered because we all knew the truth. Rosa's son Carlos dreams of being an engineer, I said. He shows me his sketches, tells me about his ideas. Rosa's daughter Maria makes me gifts because she thinks I need toys to play with grandchildren who never visit unless they're dragged here. Rosa herself notices when something is wrong in my life and cares enough to ask why. They're using you, Patricia said desperately. Can't you see that? No, Patricia. You were using me. Rosa's family loves me. There's a difference. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think it's time for you to leave. James stood up slowly. Mom, please don't do this. We're family. Family isn't about blood, James. It's about love. It's about caring for someone because you want them in your life, not because you want them out of it. Patricia grabbed her purse, her face twisted with anger and panic. This isn't over, Eleanor. We'll contest the will. We'll prove you're not competent. I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd given them in weeks. You're welcome to try. Harold Brennan has known me for 30 years. He'll testify that I was completely lucid when I made these changes. And Patricia? The recording I made of your phone conversation that night will make very interesting evidence about your motivations. It was a bluff. I hadn't recorded anything. But I saw the fear flash across her face. James paused at the door. Mom, I love you. I know I haven't shown it well, but I do love you. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the child who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. Part of me wanted to forgive, to take it all back, to pretend this had never happened. But then I remembered Patricia's voice on the phone, counting down my remaining years like items on a shopping list. I love you too, James, I said quietly, but love isn't enough anymore. Love without respect, without genuine care, without wanting the other person to thrive. That's not really love at all. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, my legs suddenly shaky. It was done. After 70 years of putting other people's needs before my own, I had finally chosen myself. The house felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. Tomorrow, Rosa would come for her regular cleaning day, and I would tell her about the will. I would see her face light up when she realized her children's futures were secure. I would watch Carlos become the engineer he dreamed of being. I would see Maria grow up knowing that someone believed she was worth investing in. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a modest house in San Antonio, teaching Maria Martinez how to make chocolate chip cookies from my mother's recipe. The 10-year-old stood on a step stool beside me, her small hands carefully measuring flour while she chattered about her art class at school. Mrs. Eleanor, she said, concentration furrowing her brow as she cracked an egg. Why do you put vanilla in cookies? Does it make them taste like flowers? I smiled, steadying her hands as she added the egg to our mixing bowl. It makes them taste like love, sweetheart. That's what my mother always told me. The house Rosa's family had bought with part of their inheritance was nothing like my old Victorian mansion, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived in years. It was filled with the sounds of a real family. Carlos practicing presentations for his engineering classes, Miguel fixing something that was always breaking, Rosa humming while she cooked, Maria singing songs she'd learned at school. After that Sunday dinner confrontation, James had called exactly 3 times. The first call came the next day, his voice tight with panic as he tried to convince me to reconsider. The second came a week later, with Patricia coaching him in the background about what to say. The third and final call had been 2 months ago, when their lawyer informed them that contesting the will would be pointless. Harold had documented my mental competency thoroughly, and their own behavior had been witnessed by too many people. I felt no satisfaction in their defeat, only a deep sense of peace that I'd made the right choice. Rosa knocked gently on the kitchen doorframe. Mrs. Eleanor, are you sure about this? You don't have to help with the cookies. You should be resting. At 71, I was probably in better health than I'd been in years. Having people around who actually wanted me alive rather than planning for my death had done wonders for my energy and spirits. Nonsense, I said, ruffling Maria's hair. This is the best part of my day. Carlos appeared in the doorway, home from his classes at the University of Texas. At 19, he was thriving in the engineering program, his grades stellar, his confidence growing every semester. But more than that, he had become like the grandson I'd never really had, asking my advice, sharing his dreams, including me in his life because he wanted to, not because he felt obligated. Abuela Eleanor, he said, using the nickname that had developed naturally over the months, I got my test results back. 96% in structural engineering. The pride in his voice made my heart swell. That's wonderful, mijo. Your bridges are going to change the world someday. He grinned and grabbed a cookie from the cooling rack. Maybe I'll design one and name it after you. As evening settled over the house, I found myself on the small back patio with Rosa, watching Miguel tend to the vegetable garden he'd planted. This was our routine now, quiet conversations in the fading light, sharing the comfortable silence of people who truly knew each other. Any regrets? Rosa asked, her voice gentle but direct as always. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret losing James? Did I regret the years I'd spent believing Patricia cared about me? Did I regret discovering so late in life that I'd been valued more for my bank account than my heart? Only one, I said finally. I regret that it took me 70 years to understand that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your life by choice. Rosa reached over and squeezed my hand. Carlos wants to show you something before bed. He's been working on it all week. In the living room, Carlos had spread his latest project across the coffee table. Detailed architectural drawings of a community center, complete with classrooms, a library, and spaces for families to gather. I was thinking, he said, his eyes bright with excitement, about what you said about giving back to the community. What if we built something like this? Somewhere families like ours could come to learn English, get help with homework, maybe take classes. I studied the drawings, seeing not just the careful technical details, but the heart behind them. This is beautiful, Carlos. Have you thought about where it might be built? Actually, Rosa said quietly, we were hoping you might have some ideas about that. We know you've been looking at properties. It was true. With Harold's help, I'd been researching ways to use the remainder of my estate to make a lasting impact. The Martinez family had insisted they didn't need all the money I'd left them. Rosa was practical enough to know they could live comfortably on far less than I'd bequeathed. There's a lot on the east side, I said slowly, near where a lot of immigrant families live. It's been for sale for months, and I think the price might be negotiable. Maria looked up from her coloring book. Would it have art classes? I want to teach other kids how to make dolls like I made for you. It would have whatever the community needs, I told her, including art classes taught by talented young artists. That night, lying in the small guest room that had become mine, I reflected on the strange turns my life had taken. A year ago, I'd been a lonely widow marking time until death, valued only for what I could provide financially. Now I was a beloved grandmother figure in a family that saw me as essential to their daily happiness. My phone, which rarely rang anymore, buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be James reaching out again. But it was Margaret, my old friend who had helped orchestrate the revelation of my family's true nature. Saw James and Patricia at the grocery store today. They looked miserable. Patricia's driving a 10-year-old Honda now. Thought you should know. No regrets here about helping you see the truth. I smiled and set the phone aside without responding. Their financial struggles weren't my concern anymore, and I felt no joy in their difficulties. What mattered was that I was no longer funding a lifestyle for people who saw me as an inconvenience. The next morning brought unexpected news. Harold called to tell me that James had contacted his office, not about the will this time, but asking if I might be willing to meet with him privately. He seemed different, Harold said carefully, humbler. He said he's been thinking about what you said that night, about the difference between love and obligation. I was quiet for a long moment. What do you think? I think people can change, Eleanor. The question is whether you're interested in finding out if he has. That afternoon, I found myself sitting across from my son in a small cafe downtown, the neutral territory we'd both insisted on. James looked older, grayer, with lines around his eyes I didn't remember. His clothes were still expensive, but not as expensive as they used to be. Thank you for meeting me, he said, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup as if he needed the warmth. You said it was important. It is. Mom, I owe you an apology. Not because I want anything from you. I know that ship has sailed, but because you deserved better from me. And I failed you. I studied his face, looking for the calculation I'd grown so used to seeing. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse. Patricia and I separated 2 months ago, he continued. The money problems were part of it, but mainly it was because I realized she was right about one thing. I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who saw my own mother as an obstacle instead of a person. What changed your mind? I started going to therapy. And the therapist asked me a question that stopped me cold. She asked, "When was the last time I'd called you just to hear your voice? Not because I wanted something or was checking on something." I couldn't answer it. James leaned forward slightly. "I don't want your money back, Mom. I don't want to contest the will or cause you any more pain. I just want to know if there's any chance we could rebuild some kind of relationship, not as your heir, but as your son." For the first time in our conversation, I felt a flicker of the love I'd once felt for this man. Not the desperate, sacrificial love that had blinded me to his faults, but something quieter and more sustainable. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Too much has happened for us to go back to what we were. But maybe we could try to build something new. What would that look like?" "It would look like you getting to know who I am now, not who you think I should be. It would look like you understanding that Rosa's family is my family now, and respecting that choice. It would look like you proving over time that you value my presence in your life, not my absence from it." James nodded slowly. "I'd like to try, if you're willing." 6 months after that conversation, James had proven himself in small but meaningful ways. He called every Sunday, not to check on my health or my finances, but to ask about my week, my thoughts, my life with the Martinez family. He sent birthday cards to Carlos and Maria. He never once suggested that I was making a mistake with my inheritance decisions. We were building something new, not the relationship we'd had before, but something honest and sustainable. He would never be my primary family again, but perhaps he could be a part of the extended family I was creating. As I write this, sitting in my sunny corner of Rosa's house with Maria's latest artwork covering the walls around me, I think about the woman I was a year ago. She was so focused on being needed that she forgot to notice whether she was actually wanted. She was so afraid of being alone that she accepted being unloved. Now, at 71, I wake up every morning in a house where people are genuinely happy to see me. I help Carlos with his engineering homework, not because I have to, but because I enjoy it. I teach Maria to cook not out of obligation, but because she asks me to. I sit with Rosa in the evenings not because we're filling time, but because we genuinely enjoy each other's company. The Martinez Community Center is breaking ground next month, funded by my estate and designed by Carlos as his senior project. It will serve hundreds of families like Rosa's, providing education, support, and hope. My name won't be on any buildings, but my legacy will live in every life that center touches. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment. It's living so well that you forget why you wanted revenge in the first place. I chose love over obligation, chosen family over biological family, purpose over comfort. I discovered that it's never too late to start over, to choose differently, to build the life you actually want instead of the life you think you're supposed to have. My will stands as I wrote it. When my time comes, everything I've built will go to people who saw value in my life, not profit in my death. And until that time comes, I plan to live every day surrounded by people who choose to love me, just as I choose to love them. That, I've learned, is what family really means.